Hey guys, in this video we are going to be building a bot which scrapes coronavirus statistics for your country and then sends an email to your loved ones with those statistics to get a daily update on the coronavirus statistics for your country. So this bot was actually requested by one of my students. So he asked me to use this website, worldometers.info, and it's actually a pretty cool website. If you check it out, it shows some live statistics about a whole bunch of stuff like birth today, net population growth today, all these stats. It's really cool. But anyway, if you click on coronavirus over here, it will show you the total amount of coronavirus cases at the current point in time, total deaths, and total recovered. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see a table which has every single country over here, and then it has the total cases, new cases, total deaths, new deaths, total recovered. What I'm going to do is what was requested by the student of mine is he wanted the total cases, total deaths, and total recovered for a inputted country. All right, so let's come here and open up UiPath Studio, and let's now start building this bot. All right, so in short, what this bot's going to do is it's going to take as input a country. It will then output the total cases, total deaths, and total recovered values for that country, and it'll then email it to the emails you specify. So we can come here to process, and I'm going to create a new process. Let's call it Corona Daily Update. All right, I'll click create. We want to first start by navigating to this website, worldometers.info coronavirus. So I'm going to copy this, right click copy, and I'll come here and we can click this button, open main workflow, and we can drag in open browser activity. There it is, drag that in, and you can see it creates a sequence around our open browser. So let's just rename that to main. Right, it's always good practice just to rename your main sequence to main. Then open browser, we can come here to insert the URL. Of course, let's not forget to put our double quotes and then the URL. We can also rename this from open browser to open worldometer website. Just like that. We also want to specify it to open in Google Chrome. All right, and let's also check new session over here. Let's try and run this and see if it works. So there you go. It opened our Worldometers website in a new tab. So our next step now is to scrape the data from this table. So once we've navigated to the site, we want to scrape all this data. So what you can do is you can use our data scraping wizard. All right, so you can just click next and you can select on any value inside this table. All right, I'm going to click this world over here. You'll see here that the wizard recognized that this is a table. It says you selected a table cell. Would you like to extract the data from the whole table? Then we select yes. Right, as you can see here is all the data in the table. Next we can click finish. Then it's going to ask if the data is spanning multiple pages. Sometimes when you have structured data, there's usually pagination where you can click next page. But in this case, there isn't that because we can see the entire table on this one view. So we'll click no, just like that. So you'll see it creates a new sequence, a new attach browser, and a new extract structured data activity. So what we want to do is we want to cut this, right click cut, and paste it into our open browser over here. All right, since we've already attached to this browser, then we want to extract the data inside this browser. All right, so just note that this extract structured data activity or extract data activity, it'll never work unless it's inside either an attached browser or an open browser activity. A lot of my students have problems where the extract structured data activity is not scraping the data, and usually the answer is because you don't have it inside an attached browser or an open browser activity. As soon as you have that, you'll notice it'll work. So I'm going to come here and delete this sequence. We don't need this anymore. And you'll see we have an error over here. That's because of the variable over here in the output, extract data table. So it's telling us that it's inaccessible or it's been deleted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to create a new variable, Control K on your keyboard to create a new variable. And we can call this just COVID DT, COVID data table. You can click enter. That's fine. Click away, and you'll see our error is now gone. So I'm going to call this extract coronavirus data table. Cool. And we have now all this data stored in a variable called COVID DT. So usually if we want to view the data inside of our data table, what we would do is we'd use a output data table activity, which is this one here. We'd drag that in, we'd then convert our variable, which is our COVID DT, into a string, and then we would print that string to the output panel. So we can do that. And actually, let's just do it quickly just to show you COVID DT. Then over here, we can create a new variable, Control K, call it maybe string DT. This is just a temporary variable just to output it. Then we can use a write line activity. There it is. And the line we're writing is the string DT, and that is it. So now if I come here and click run file, it should open up our browser. There it is. It should scrape our data. And now if we come to our output panel, you'll see here is all the data from the data table. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this. I want to show you another way where you can view all the data inside here without having to output it. I'm just going to delete these. We don't even need these anymore. So what I'm going to show you now is another way to see the output to the data table. So what you can do is, instead of using the output data table activity, what you can do is you can run this in debug mode, where you can see the values of variables and of other properties. So let me show you how to do that. If we come here, you want to click step into, and you'll see what the step into does is it steps into the first activity, which in this case is the main sequence. Then we click step into again. It now goes to the open browse activity, and it just follows the sequence that the automation follows, right? But instead of it running it all consecutively, it's running it step by step. All right, so I'm going to click step into, and you can see now it opens the browser. And what you want to do is you want to keep clicking step into until after the extract corona or the extract data table activity has run. All right, so you can see here we have a data table, all right, and we can view this, and it hasn't yet run. So I'm just going to click step into, and it will now it's run. As you can see, it's gone back now to end this do sequence, and you can see that it says extract coronavirus data table closed. And now if we come here to our data table, you can see here, if we click on this little magnifying glass, you can see in this locals panel, you can see all the data inside the data table. All right, so this is the same thing as what it would have outputted when we use the output data table activity. All right, so I just wanted to show that to you. It's pretty useful to use this locals panel when debugging to see the values of your variables and properties while you are busy running your bot. So I'm going to click stop there. Now, after we've scraped this data, what we want to do is we want to loop through this data table. And what we then want to do is grab a specific country's row. All right, so let me show you how to do that. Before we do that, if I come to our variables here, you'll see we have a string DT variable over there, all right? But since we're no longer going to be using this, we want to delete it. So there's two ways to delete this. Either we can right click and we can click delete to delete the variable, or instead of that, you can come up to your design ribbon and you'll see there's a button here which says remove unused variables. So if you have any variables that aren't being used anywhere inside your workflow, it'll then delete it just by a click of the button. So I'm going to click that. We can click here. So you can see now that the string DT is now deleted. Next, what we want to do is we want to use a for each row. All right, so I'm going to come and search for each row. And the for each row activity is what we use to loop through each row in a data table. There's also the for each, which is used to loop through anything else which isn't a data table. All right, so in this video, we'll first be using a for each row to loop through all the rows in a data table, and later on we'll be using the for each to loop through email addresses. So let's start off with for each row, and I'll drag that in below our open browser activity. All right, so here we have for each row, and it's asking us to input a data table variable over here. And what we want to input over here is the variable that we have created over here, which is our COVID DT. So if I come here and I start typing COVID DT, you'll see that it can't find it. And the reason it can't find it is because it's not accessible via the scope. So we need to change the scope of this variable. So if we come back to this activity and we go to variables, you'll see here we have the scope set to the do sequence. Now this do sequence is this sequence over here. All right, so what the scope over here means is that the only place you'll be able to use this COVID DT variable is inside this do sequence. If you want to use this COVID DT variable outside of the do sequence, we need to elevate the scope to a different sequence. So in this case, we only have two sequence activities inside this project. We only have the do and we have the main. All right, so as you can see here, the for each row is accessible in the main sequence. All right, so what we need to do is we need to come to our COVID DT variable and change the scope from do to main. And now when we come here and we start typing COVID, you'll see now it is accessible. All right, so we can click that and we are now able to loop through each row in our data table. So let's just use a simple write line, and let's simply write all the countries in the data table to the output panel. So to do that, we can use our row variable, and we can use open bracket, close bracket, and then inside here we can put a 0. Now what a 0 is doing over here is this is indexing the first column inside the data table. So if we come here, column 0 would be all the countries, column 1 will be all the column total cases, column 2 would be all the new cases, etc. So let's now change row 0 to a string, .toString, and it'll then get rid of that error. So if you didn't know that you had to do that, if we delete this and we hover our mouse over this error, it'll tell us strict disallow implicit conversion from object to string. All right, whenever you see something like that, you know you need to convert from its current format to its required format. We know it's supposed to be a string because inside the text over here, we click these 3 dots. You can see here the variable that it requires, or the data type it requires, is a string. So we can just add a .toString and it'll then convert the object to a string. We can click OK and cool, that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and I'm going to run this again so we can see all the outputted countries inside our output panel. So there you go, it opens up our website, it scrapes the table, and then as you can see here, over there, it's busy scraping. Cool, it's done. Now let's go to our output panel, and I'm just going to hide all these trace activities, and we can see here, there is all of our countries. All right, so now what my student asked is, he wants this workflow to allow the user to specify the country, and then it will output the relative statistics for that country. So whenever you require user input, you can use an input dialog, all right, which is this one here. So I'm going to drag that into the top of the workflow. All right, before we even open the website, we first use the input dialog, and we can call this something like country, and we can have the question saying which country, or enter country name. Cool. And then we can create an output variable over here, Control K, and let's call this country name. Country name, click enter. Great. So now when we run this workflow, what it's first going to do is it's going to pop up with this little input dialog. There it is. And we had entered the country name. All right. So I'm just going to stop this and the country name needs to reference one of the countries that we have inside this table, which is pretty much every country in the world. All right, so what we can do is I'm going to scroll down here to our for each row, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an if activity inside the for each. All right, I'm actually going to come here to this body, and I'm going to right click and delete, and I'm going to drag in a if. So I'll drag that there, and we are searching if the row in column index 0, remember that's the column which has all the country names, .toString is equal to the country name variable, which we just specified as the user from the input dialog, .toString. And now what we can do is we can output something. So let's use a right line again, and let's output the row, instead of row 0, let's output row 1 .toString. Now remember, row 1, if we're looking at our data, is the total cases. So we can even give this a little name over here. I'm going to open the expression editor so it's easier to see. Before this, I'm going to add double quotes and a plus, and then inside the double quotes, I'm going to write total cases, just like that. And then let's actually just add a space, maybe put a colon and a space, just like that. We can click OK. So now what this will do is this bot's going to first ask the user for country name. After it's asked the user for country name, it's going to scrape all the data, it'll loop through all the data, and it'll look for where that country is equal to what the user specified, and it'll then output the total cases. You know, instead of using a right line, let's rather use a message box so it can pop up, because it's better to see, it's more interactive. So I'll just copy this expression, or cut it and paste it there, and I'll delete this right line activity. Cool. So that's all we need to do. I'm going to come here and close this. So I'm going to specify South Africa as the country we want to get the total cases for. So I'll come here, enter country name. We can simply write South Africa. Right, input dialogues, you don't need to put your double quotes, and you can click OK. So now what it's doing is it's scraping all the data from the data table, it's looping through the if, and there is our output, total cases 3,465. So let's scroll and just check that to make sure it's right. And where is South Africa? It's a bit hard to find. I'm just going to search the page. There it is. So as you can see, there you go, column 1, total cases is 3,465. So our robot got it right. That is awesome. All right, so now that we got that right, we are able to scrape any of these columns just by specifying the index. We know this is index 1, we know this is index 3, and that's index 5. All right, so let's now come and simply assign variables to all of those values. So what you can do is we can use a get row item activity. All right, and I'm going to drag that in, and so you can see it requires a data table row variable. So we know in this case it's just our row we created there. So I'm going to come here and enter our row variable. Then on the right hand side here in the properties panel, you can see it requires either the column index, or column name input. So we're using the index, so we can just use a 1 there. So basically what this is doing, it's the same as what this expression here is doing, except now we are storing it in a variable. So we can create a variable here, and we can call it the total cases. Great. So another way we could have done this is we could have simply used an assign, and we could have said total cases is equal to this over there. So this is basically, these two things are doing the exact same thing right now. So I'm actually not going to use this get row item. I'm going to delete this, and I'm just rather going to use this assign because it's a bit more of an elegant way of doing it. I'm going to delete that message box, and I'm going to come here and copy paste this assign 3 times, and we are first assigning the total cases, so I'll just give that a name, total cases. Next we are assigning the total deaths, so I'll come here and I'll create a new variable, total deaths, and that is now in index row 3. Right, and then lastly, let's not forget our name, assign deaths. Lastly, we are assigning recovered, and we can create a new variable, Control K, total recovered, and that is in index 5. So let's just confirm that that's in index 5. We can go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, it is. It's in total recovered is index 5. So next step is let's try and output these to make sure they are working. All right, it's always good to test as you build. So what I'm going to do is before I test, I'm just going to come to my variables and I'm going to make sure we elevate the scope to our main, so they are accessible from our main sequence. Cool. Then let's come, I'm going to minimize that, and what we can do is we can use let's just use a message box again. Message box, drag that in, and I'm just going to drag in or enter our total cases. Then I'll say plus, and then you can use an expression VBCR. What that does is that's going to create a new line. All right, so it'll just add these variables on a separate line just so it's easier to read. Then we have total deaths, and then we have plus VBCR. Right, you can see that's a variable. Let's go total recovered. All right, and let's just see what this error is telling us. VBCR is not declared. Oh, it's because we wrote VCCR. So it's VBCR. There you go. And now the error is gone. So if this was a capital R, as mentioned before, it should still be fine. We can click OK. Variables are gone. And next, we just want to run this. I'll close our table there and let's run this to see if it works. Enter country name. All right, let's enter another country, let's say Spain. Click OK. So there is our 3 values, all separated on different lines, just for easier readability. Now let's scroll to Spain. Let's just do a search for Spain. There it is. And we can see there 204,178, 204,178. So it did the cases correct, 21,282 correct, and the total recovered 82,514. Great. So this is now scraping correctly. We can click OK, and the workflow ends. So now that we have successfully been able to scrape the country and all the data and store them into variables, what we can do is use a for each to send emails. Right, so I'm going to come here to a for each. For each, there it is. I'm going to drag this in. And what I'm going to do is we are looping for each item in, and then over here you require an array. So an array is you use braces, just like that, which is a curly bracket, and then you can enter a whole bunch of items in the array. So in our case, we're going to be using email addresses, all right? So let's say you have a whole lot of different emails. Let's say irene@gmail.com. Oh, let's not forget our quotes, right? Because this is a string. Comma. Put another, let's put it jim@gmail.com. tom@gmail.com. Cool. So this doesn't really matter. You can just enter a whole lot of email addresses in here that you want to send the data to. All right, so there we have a comma separated list of strings. Now it's important here for our type argument to set this to a string. So this is because each item in the array is a string. All right, so now what we are doing is this for each item is going to loop through each item in the array. So I'm going to come here and use a write line activity, and I'm just going to write the item right to the output panel. So that's simply all we need to do. In fact, let's rename this item to email, and then over here it automatically changes to email, so that's good. All right, so instead of running this from the start, what you can actually do is you can come to this activity and you can right click and you can say run from this activity. All right, so if you click run from this activity, cool, then you can click continue over here, just like that. And you can see it now ran from that activity. If we come to our output panel, we can see our output of our 3 variables. Great, so that's awesome. So you can see that's working nicely. It's outputting our 3 email addresses. So now what we would do is we could simply use a send email activity. Let's say something like, let's say we're using Outlook. All right, send Outlook mail message. We can drag that in. Now in the to section, we would put our email variable, all right, which is this one over here. The subject could be something like daily coronavirus stats, right? And then the body, let's just open up our body. We can say something like total cases, colon space, plus, and then our total cases variable, plus our VBCR to create a new line, all right, plus, and then I'm just going to copy paste this 3 times, and I'm going to rename cases here to deaths and cases here to recovered. Delete this last plus, change this variable here to our total deaths, and this variable here to our total recovered, just like that. You can click OK, and there is the body of our email. So we can then come here to this right line. We don't need this anymore. I'm just going to delete that. Now the last thing you'd probably want to do is, instead of specifying a user input every time, like, we can just disable this, and we can scroll down here to our if statement. Where's our if? Inside our for each row. And here where we said country name dot to string, we could change that to just a static country, for example, whichever country you're in. So if you're based in India, you can just say India, just like that, and then it'll only ever send the stats of India to these people over here. All right, so I'm not going to run this because these are just made up emails, so I don't want to send emails to random people, but that is basically it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please give this video a like. It really helps out the channel since it's brand new. I hope you and your family are staying safe and healthy during this time. Thanks for watching.